Okay, the next order of business is the public hearing, which I am going to open at 7:03 for the public hearing of the Planning Board on the proposed amendments to the subdivision regulations to incorporate low impact development (LID) techniques throughout the regulations. A copy of the proposed amendments can be found on the Greenfield Town website. Eric, just for we've reviewed this, the board's discussed it, but just for everybody's edification and background, would you mind just giving us again your 5-minute just overview on where we are in Genesis?
Yes, if I miss anything, Nancy, you could fill in as well. Nancy was involved. So this is the recommendations that we're trying to get adopted here. And the subdivision regs have to go back to a grant that the Franklin Regional Council of Governments received, like in 2016, I believe it was, 4 years ago. And that grant, part of that grant was to partner with the city of Greenfield to look at our land use regulations to see how we can incorporate low impact development into our regs. And so I think the city council yesterday actually voted in the LID recommendations for the zoning ordinance, and now we're following up with the subdivision regs, and then we'll be complete. And it's also recommended in our master plan, which is why we're moving forward with this as well.
All right, thanks, Eric. And again, this is the planning board votes this in, and it becomes incorporated into the ordinance. This doesn't have to go before the town council, right?
That's correct, so, and it would not go in the zoning ordinance. These would be amending our subdivision regulations, which only requires a simple majority vote of the planning board to adopt.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So I think what we'll do here is we'll give the opportunity the public an opportunity to kind of weigh in. We'll listen, and then I think we'll close the public hearing at that point, and the board will deliberate, and hopefully vote this evening. So are there members of the public who would like to speak? Okay, Mary, just state your name and address, please.
Yeah, hi, this is Mary Chickwin, and I'm at 254 Davis Street in Greenfield.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm just wondering, I did send comments in writing to Eric earlier today. I'm not sure if anyone's gotten a chance to see them. No.
No, I did not. The city hall was closed and I didn't check.
Okay, so just procedurally, just trying to figure out, I have quite a few comments. I mean, not exhaustive comments, but I'm just wondering, should I just go paragraph by paragraph, or what works best?
Well, we don't have a room full of people talking. So if you have like 5 or 10 minutes worth of things you'd like to discuss, that's fine. Okay,
thanks. And I just wanted to mention also that I'm these comments are sort of a collaboration of a few of us from the Greenfield Tree Committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of them.
Okay.
So on page 1, under the low impact development definition, I think it's the last sentence, examples include but are not limited to. I would add the word ecologically before the word sensitive. And then I would also, or we propose adding as one of the examples, planting of native plants and minimal or no lawn.
I can actually share my screen and bring these up so everybody can see them, if that would be helpful.
Mary, can you repeat the second thing you said?
Sure. So one of the so that last sentence gives examples of different types of techniques, and that would include planting of native plants and minimal or no lawn.
This is Nancy. Would it make sense for, I don't know if you have the capabilities, Mary, but would it make sense for you to share the screen, because then they can see where the changes are that you're suggesting?
Well, that would be up to Charles.
Yeah, I could do that if we can't do it this way. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
It looks like it's willing to just let me share, so should I go ahead and try that?
Yeah, I just made you the presenter, so you should be able to do that.
Okay. Okay. Can people see my screen?
Can you make it bigger?
Yep.
Yes, that's good.
So then this is at the bottom of the first page. This is nitpicky. It's just rather than reasons, it really should be specific constraints or other factors of why LID wasn't utilized. And then under the definitive plans, the second paragraph, we're recommending wherever it's talking about trees, using the word mature trees, because that's a phrase that you used earlier in the proposed changes. And then we felt that the recommendation to preserve trees should be specified in how that be done by protecting the critical root zone. And so there's a little phrase there that tells what the critical root zone is. Otherwise, I think later in this text, it talks about protecting the trees by putting a cage around them or something like that. And that seems like, I think we've all seen construction sites where there's, big construction vehicles parked under trees, or, stuff heaped under trees or whatever. So this is a way of getting at a more specific way of protecting the trees and the root zone. Under this next paragraph that starts with landscaping plan, we were suggesting defining DBH, diameter breast height, is 4.5 feet up from the tree trunk base. Not everyone will know that. And then speeding on through to page 4, we're suggesting you had a minimum of 4 feet for the tree belt minimum width. We're suggesting 5 to 6 feet. I think it's been shown that a 4-foot minimum is a pretty cramped tree belt for trees to thrive on. On to page 5, just a couple of little nitpicky things. Under environmental assessment, you have both the words may and shall, so I'm assuming you probably want the word shall. On page 6, we're recommending adding the tree warden as one of the people to be in receipt of the environmental assessment along with the Conservation Commission. And the same with that second paragraph, that the tree warden would receive the statement that is distributed to the other entities. And then, excuse me, this next paragraph is just word for word a repetition of what was stated earlier in the ordinance about protecting the critical root zone again, where streets are concerned. And it didn't seem like anywhere in here it specified how the tree belt should be planted. we want to make sure that when people are pointed to the approved tree species list in Chapter 40 of the Greenfield Code, that they're looking specifically at the large tree category, so that you don't end up with a situation where somebody plants, 30 crab apples and they provide no shade onto the street. So we're looking for large shade trees to provide the maximum amount of shade onto hardscapes. We're actually suggesting within this paragraph to reduce the caliper. It was listed at 3 inches. We're suggesting 2 inches. It has been proven that trees with a 3-inch caliper, those big, huge trees that come in balled and burlapped bags, oftentimes don't do as well in terms of establishing their root system. So we're actually suggesting a slightly smaller tree to start with in terms of the caliper. And then we're specifying how far apart they should be planted. And then this is something we're hoping you'll consider where utilities are concerned. If we're having utilities buried, we'd like to see them kept out of the tree belt and instead buried along the edge of the street. And the rationale for that is once you get utilities in the tree belts, it's very easy for that belt to end up turning into a utility belt where you start getting pushback about planting trees in there, and pretty soon you have a bare, grassy strip with no trees. So it actually makes it easier on the trees if, say, I don't know, somebody has to come and dig up a line. It's not going to disrupt the root system as it would if they were digging in the tree belt. So we hope you'll consider that recommendation. And then finally on this last page, I'm not sure if it was intended that the words grass plots go away. I'm not even sure what a grass plot is.
Yes, that was the intent, because it makes sense, tree belts and not grass plots. So,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so again, we're just trying to get all of the, tree belt minimums to agree with one another. So we're recommending 5 to 6 foot minimum. In this section labeled D, it looked like there was the word tree was missing. We're suggesting, rather than saying, oh, you can plant on the tree belt or in a setback, we're suggesting to emphasize planting on tree belts to get that shade onto the hardscape, onto the street, but to allow the tree warden to approve an alternative if there's a good reason that the tree belt shouldn't be planted with trees. So it's not really changing, it's just strengthening the language to really try to encourage planting on the tree belts instead of in people's yards, where then when you're planting in people's yards, the city then loses control of that. That's no longer really public property. This next one, E, is just again suggesting 2-inch rather than 3-inch, and at 4.5 feet above the ground. This 6 inches looks like it's a remnant from the last round of lid rewrites that we looked at. Again, pointing people not just to the tree species list in Chapter 172, but specifically the large tree category. And then inserting the tree warden in number F as the entity who verifies that the trees actually have survived for that required 1-year planting, so that there's somebody who actually goes out and takes a look and ensures that they've done what they said they were going to do. So that is the extent of our recommendations from the tree committee.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, sure. Does the board have any questions for Mary after having gone through this list? George?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the thoroughness of all the feedback, and the idea of the 2-inch caliper trees being more survivable compared to 3-inch resonates from my learning as well. Going back to the first page, when you mentioned, Mary, planting of native plants, I can understand how native plants have some desirability. Generally, I'm wondering if the purpose is low impact development, how is that relevant?
Nancy, do you want to speak to that since that was your, oh, I'm not sure procedurally if that's allowed, probably not.
Well, no, that's okay. I'll recognize Nancy if she just states her name and address, and then we can have a back and forth.
Thank you.
Nancy Hazard, 30 Spring Terrace, Greenfield.
Thanks, Nancy.
So my thinking about that is, well, I want to talk about the lawn first. So lawns notoriously, they don't actually absorb water well. Water runs off of them and soil erodes from them. So that was the thing about the lawns. And as far as adding the native plants, I guess the question would be, well, this is a definition, so it's up to the board to make that decision of whether the plants being native is something that low impact should do. But my feeling is that the low impact development is not just to deal with stormwater, but also to deal with building habitat and that sort of thing. In that respect, it's really important to focus on. I've been learning more and more about.
I got to tell you that we have scheduled a Zoom session with Natalie.
Who's this?
Tomorrow morning.
Not sure who that was. It's not listed under participants. Anybody I recognize?
Is it in the background of somebody's feed here? Because they're not showing up.
Scheduled with Marky for tomorrow morning, but that's not happening.
Sounds like bleed through.
It seems to be gone now.
Yep. Okay, Nancy, sorry about that.
Yep. So just that I've been learning so much about native plants and the importance of them ecosystem in a general sort of way. And so this is an opportunity.
Well, at least most people said they wanted to do January 4th.
I'm going to try muting all. Okay, everybody's muted. Okay, Nancy, so you try speaking. Unmute you, Nancy, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay. No, that doesn't work. I mean, yes, I can unmute myself, but you're still getting interference. So let me see. I was trying to say that sentence. So just because so much I've been learning that it seems like low impact development is the opportunity to also strengthen habitat and just everything about what we're doing, because each plant that there's only so much space. I guess I would say that, there's only so much space in the universe. And if we fill it with non-native plants, we're in trouble. So I would urge you to include that statement. I can talk more about it, but I don't think you need more detail unless you have other questions.
Thank you. Should I continue, Charles?
Yes, George, please.
Thanks. When both in the table at the top of page 4 and then later on, I realize it says tree belt minimum width, and then we've made it a range. The range had been 4 to 8. I understand your suggestion 4 would be insufficient. But I was curious why you made it 5 to 6 rather than 5 to 8.
Can I speak to that? Is that okay for me to speak to that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I was muted. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about an 8-foot wide tree belt, and also there was I was thinking about, okay, you've got the edge of the street, and let's say you have 8 feet of tree belt, and then you have a sidewalk, which is 5 feet, so that's a total of 13 feet. And then I don't know what the regs are for how far a building can be from the edge of the sidewalk, but it just felt like a huge amount of space, and I started thinking like, oh, this looks like a high-end suburban neighborhood. It's not really it's not taking advantage of, it's taking up a lot of land that's not being used very efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. We had this conversation about the width of the tree belt, and Eric, I thought we had decided that we wanted to narrow it down from 8 feet to something less, like the 4 to 6 or something. Didn't we have that? Does anybody else remember having that conversation?
I remember having that, yeah.
George?
I think originally the proposal said 8. It only had 8 feet. And I think that was our discussion, resulted in us changing it to 4 to 8 feet as a range.
Well, I agree with the idea that 8 feet is a little wide, and also just the land is always tight, and so it just dimensionally just makes it more challenging for the developer to plan out a subdivision. So I actually like the 4 to 6 foot range. I don't know what others think. George?
Again, they're proposing 5 to 6 feet.
I like the 5 to 6 foot range.
That works for me. Go ahead, George.
Oh, sorry. When you mentioned, because we ran through it kind of quick, I didn't catch everywhere it was, but you were talking about specifying that trees would come from the large tree category with a mature height of 40 to 80 feet. And that would suggest that in every situation, every application, that would be this would restrict it to that choice. And can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, is Mary still on, or is Mary off? Or
Mary's still on.
Mary, do you want to talk to that?
Yes, I couldn't get unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so presumably if this is a new development and the utilities are being undergrounded and there's a adequate sized tree belt that runs between the tree and the sidewalk, then there are none of the usual constraints we encounter, in an existing neighborhood where we're, trying to cram a tree in between, whatever, a utility line and a house that's super close to the sidewalk or whatever. So we believe that, well, it's been proven that, larger shade trees are going to reduce the heat island effect. They're going to provide more shade onto the hardscape. So that's why we're recommending that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
This is Jim. Can I say something here? If you go north on High Street, as you're driving up to the north on the east side, there is very, very narrow I won't say sidewalk, but there's only 1 foot basically between the street and the sidewalk. So some areas were totally disregarded when it's recently done. Is anybody familiar with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as towns and cities develop, you see lots of different conditions in terms of widths of tree belts, and so it's amazing to me some of the environments that trees actually thrive in. But I think that looking at going from a clean slate when a developer's coming in and looking at a subdivision, it gives us the opportunity to sort of standardize that condition. And so I think that even though there are varying conditions and more extreme conditions, in downtown all over the place, this is a different opportunity for us.
Okay.
Anybody else have any further thoughts or discussion here at this point? Eric, what is so what are the sort of regulations around incorporating new language into the ordinance post publication at this point?
The subdivision regs it's pretty broad, the public hearing notice, and it's very generalized so that people can understand what it's about, low impact development. So all these very specific recommendations being made by the tree committee could easily be voted on by the planning board this evening as incorporating it as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Would we have to do them one by one, or could we how does the board feel about just accepting sort of wholesale the suggested amendments at this point?
You could do it wholesale. You could do it by one vote.
Do we want to do it that way, or do we want to go through and do each individual section? George?
Well, I'm hesitant about belaboring the details, but that's what we do. And I know that I've appreciated all the work here. I would need to scroll through the document because we didn't have it in advance. And there were a number, I commented a question about a number of them that caught my eye, but I'd need to scroll through more slowly to be able to consider them. So I just need a little more access to it without it being so rushed through.
So you're suggesting tabling a discussion for the next meeting, or doing that now, real time?
Whatever, I would find it helpful to have more time to peruse the recommendations, which I greatly appreciate. And it could either be scrolling slowly through it now and discussing it while we have the hearing going on and the people making these recommendations are here, or we could get copies of this to look over at our leisure and then come back to a discussion and decision at our next meeting.
Okay. I'm thinking that we have a couple of minor discussion items, and then we have an A&R. So it's only 7:30, and if we could scroll through and do this in 20 minutes or half an hour, Eric?
I would like time to review these. There may be something, the implications with the Department of Public Works. I need to look at these in more detail. So I would suggest doing it at the next meeting.
All right. George?
Yeah, could I ask, while we have Nancy and Mary here with the public hearing open, if we could scroll through it just a little bit, just to see if there's any dialogue we would find helpful. But I appreciate Eric's point as well.
That's an excellent point, Eric.
And Nancy's got her hand up, just letting you know.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Nancy? Chair recognizes you.
I had one thing that I wanted to bring up that Mary didn't bring up. It was, a separate thing. That in the section 880-9, where there's a table, street specification table, and I was curious why the lane width in the residential area is 12 instead of 11. Because you've got 11 in the mixed use. So why make it so wide?
Which section is this?
880-9.
Page 3, I believe,
Thank you.
the table. Which column are you referencing, Nancy?
Let me pull up the document.
I think you have to scroll
So
further
here
down.
it is. It's the, okay, yeah, I have it up on my screen too. So the fourth item says width of lanes in feet.
Mm-hmm.
Industrial 12, mixed use 11, residential 11 to 12, and minor residential 10 to 11. So why would the residential be 11 to 12? And not just 11?
Thank you for clarifying.
This was the recommendation of the Franklin Regional Council of Governments when they changed the type of street types to these categories, and those are the widths they recommended. So we went with them.
But we don't have a rationale necessarily. I mean, it could have something to do with fire safety and getting apparatus in and out. I don't know, something I could think of.
Well, I guess my issue is that if mixed use can be 11, then why can't we make the residential also just 11? Because clearly the fire gets down the mixed use areas. Just trying to minimize pavement.
The only thing I can see is that there are two types of residential streets, minor and regular residential, and the minor can go down to 10. Maybe just the width, the type of street it is and the amount of traffic that it's carrying, because it's maybe a major residential street as opposed to the minor.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to sort of. I see Nancy's point that it's kind of like why is it different than mixed use? I don't know.
I don't have an answer for that.
George?
Yeah, and I know that recalling putting together the master plan, there is an implementation item. I think I'm recalling accurately, to try to reduce lane widths to 11 feet generally, and to 10 feet where feasible. And I can look that up if we're delaying the full deliberation. I can look that up, but it does seem in keeping with the master plan. Nancy is referencing this kind of detail.
Well, I mean, if it's discretionary to a certain degree, would we want to suggest 10 to 11 for residential as well as minor residential?
I would recommend against that. Maybe we could stick with 11, but I wouldn't want to go down to 10 for major residential street.
Okay. Well, maybe we should consider, in our time between now and when we vote, looking at what it means to put that down to 11 feet.
I will check with the fire department and Department of Public Works and get their comments on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so do we want to take 20 minutes or so and scroll down through here and have an opportunity for a dialogue on these issues if needed?
Sure.
Okay, Mary, I think you have the screen, so we'll follow your lead.
Great, thanks. So the first place that we're suggesting some minor edits is in the definition of low impact development, and simply adding the word ecologically to modify the word sensitive, and then adding the planting of native plants and minimal or no lawn as another example of lid.
Okay.
To mute us all again, Charles, and then have Mary unmute.
Okay, everybody's muted. So if you want to, including me, no. So yeah, we're all muted. So if you want to speak, you have to either unmute yourself or ask me to unmute you. So Mary, I'm going to unmute you. Oh, you are unmuted. Okay, Mary.
Okay. Anything on that, on the definition then? Okay. And this bottom paragraph was really kind of nitpicky change of just suggesting if lid techniques are not practical due to site constraints or other factors, then the applicant shall document the site constraints or other factors rather than just reasons, like, I don't know. Just
a little more,
make it a little more official, yeah.
Thanks.
Yep, moving on. So this is a little more detailed here. So under the definitive plans, we're suggesting that they have to define the mature tree under subsection B, as it says, and require identification, and we're saying, and location of mature trees for the removal and preservation. So that's all the same. So we're being more specific, like where are they located, not just identify, you know, not somebody being able to just say, yeah, there's 20 sugar maples, but where are they on the plan?
Is it just mature trees we're interested in having identified? Because that's what we're asking. We're just saying just identify the mature trees.
It seems like that's what you guys are asking, yeah.
Okay. Also, so the mature isn't that's already in the bylaw now. That's not something you're adding. It's just, we didn't just say require identification of trees.
Oh no, mature is in here already. Yeah.
Okay.
And somewhere in here, I think because these are just excerpted bits from the larger, if I'm not mistaken, from the larger regulations, they don't necessarily flow, but somewhere in here you do provide a definition of mature tree.
Okay.
Which is 10 inches in diameter at breast height.
George?
Thanks. So I'm comparing my copy under the paragraph underneath T there, where you have what I see is that there's no second sentence in the copy I have. So the trees intended to be preserved, I don't see that language in my current.
Okay, I apologize. I should have made that red and I didn't. I'm not sure why. I think I was just copying and pasting from further on. So that was my error.
Okay.
So that whole second sentence is added. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And Charles, if I could further, so Eric, you were sounding like you're saying about our how much leeway we have about accepting input. It sounds like it's a bit more latitude than with a change to the zoning ordinance, because what the paragraph where that sentence is added was not a paragraph that was proposed to be changed by the FERCog recommendations. I think you muted, Eric. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I was muted. You're exactly right, George. I had that flagged myself. That's not original language to be changed, so we'd have to treat it the same as zoning. And that's not originally what was being proposed to be changed. So we'd have to do the same thing and we can't consider it.
So a number of the proposed changes the tree committee is making fit into that category, in the sense of they're looking at the document as an entirety, including established, pre-approved sections and the underlined sections, which are the recommended changes. And you're suggesting we can only look at recommendations that adjust the changes that are recommended?
Yes,
by FERCog?
it's no different than the zoning ordinance in that regard. So you're exactly right.
Well, I don't know what the time frame is for getting this out, but if there are things that we feel are important, then we could just, we could redraft it and restart the process again, couldn't we?
Yes, you could. You could do another public hearing on the new changes.
Right. Well, let's go through here and we'll see how people feel about that.
So,
Thanks.
could I go ahead?
Yes, Mary. Yep.
Okay, thanks. I have to admit, I had a little bit of trouble with the flow of this document. So I actually came back and added this sentence to this section after I added it further into the document because it just seemed to make sense to me. But maybe I made an error when I suggested it here, and it really only belongs later in the document. So you can flag that however you want. I mean, I think this is still really important to protect the critical root zone, but maybe it doesn't belong here. Maybe it only belongs later in the document.
All right, we'll see where you have it when we get to that point.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So then let's just kind of put that language on hold, and for now we'll just go to the next thing about the landscaping plan. And all this sentence is doing, where the red is defining what DBH is, which is 4.5 feet from the tree trunk base, because that was not in there.
Okay.
And then in this table suggesting, which you already talked about, the 5 to 6 foot minimum or range. And these are two little nitpicky words talking about the protection of natural features and suggesting rather than minimizing, we should avoid as much as possible. And then the next red there is just that I caught that it said both may and shall, so you probably want to take one of those words out.
Let's go with shall.
George has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, George.
Thanks. One difficulty in comparing these is that on our copy, its underlined language is that which is proposed to be changed, and in your document, Mary, the underlined isn't retained, so it's hard to do that comparison. But I will point out that I believe, and Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, based on the FERCog recommendations, shall is a change that they recommended, and they crossed out may, and we're recommending adding shall.
Exactly. I was about to say that. You beat me to it again.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but somewhere along the way, the underlined text got lost for me. So this is what I ended up with. So I apologize that I'm not working off the right.
Oh, sure. No, just trying to help. And the may was struck through, and that must have been lost in your copy as well.
It was, yeah.
Did you translate a PDF into a text document or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So this next piece, there's a suggestion that the Conservation Commission is added, and we're suggesting to also add the tree warden to the list of boards that the environmental assessment is distributed to. And then I think that's true for the next paragraph too, just suggesting that the tree warden is added to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay as a friendly amendment, add the tree warden in?
Looking. It looks like they had recommended adding Conservation Commission, so it looks like it's kind of in keeping with the idea of expanding that.
Okay.
The second tree warden, where is that being listed? Oh, I see. Let me see.
It's a somewhat different formatting, Eric. We have it indented.
See the statement above it, before number 2, it doesn't propose to be changed, that language, but the one below has Conservation Commission. So I could see adding tree warden, but the statement above it is what we've been pointing out, George, is not part of the suggested changes.
Yep. Yeah, yep.
We got to be consistent, I guess, with that. But under number 2, it could be added, tree warden.
Okay. Should we continue on?
Yes.
So under the street obstructions, the original language talked about trees intending to be preserved shall be protected by suitable boxes, fenders, or wells as appropriate. And that's where we really felt like being more specific about how trees should be protected is really important on construction sites. And there's a simple formula that anybody could use to determine kind of how far away from the base of a tree should be protected. So we're not just, leaning upright boards against a tree trunk and calling it protection, but we're really keeping heavy equipment away from the trees altogether.
And that was an added sentence, so that would be in keeping with adjusting the recommendation.
Got it. Okay. Should I keep going?
Sure.
Thanks. So I don't know if this then is not in keeping, suggesting that, the planting of the size, the type of tree, the large shade tree, and, the caliper and 30 feet on center, all that. Maybe this is an inappropriate place for this to happen.
Well, if we wanted to try and get that language like that in, I mean, it's got to, it seems like that's a reasonable place for it to go. I just don't know if it's gonna fly in terms of just being, a minor friendly amendment suggestion.
The only thing I can say, which makes this slightly different, is that this entire section is new and being proposed, underlined. So adding the new language is additional underlying language. I could see us doing that.
Okay. Yep. George, good.
He beat me this time.
So the specifics that we're suggesting are just pointing people to the large tree section of the tree list and suggesting the 2-inch diameter instead of the 3. And again, defining the 4.5 feet above ground. And then in terms of how far from one another the trees should be planted, approximately 30 feet on center.
Okay.
Should I keep going?
Sure.
So this one is the one about the buried utilities. And suggesting that utilities should be kept out of the tree belts. This is based on experiences we had in not so distant past years where Berkshire Gas was beginning to bury their gas lines in tree belts, essentially rendering the tree belts unplantable and really turning them into utility belts. And I just think it's a slippery slope, especially if we're talking about a tree belt that's only 5 or 6 feet wide and you're wanting to bury telephone, electric, cable, and other conduit lines on the edge of a tree belt. That, to me, seems like that the whole tree belt goes away in that case.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like something that the DPW is going to want to weigh up in, because the nice thing about having utilities in the tree belt is you can dig them up without you can get at them without having to tear up pavement. What are your thoughts, Eric?
I agree. I probably should check on this one with the DPW.
Okay.
Charles?
Yes, George.
Yeah, this section's a little confusing with the recommendations from the FERCog removed, because a bunch of it is new language, and there's some that is struck through that is not struck through on this copy. But if you look at the last sentence, gas lines are required to be placed under the paved roadway and not within the tree belt or grass strip areas. That is the new recommended language from FERCog.
Right. Yep,
So-
I see that.
That's from the DPW, actually. That's one of their recommendations.
Ah, okay.
Great.
All right, so I guess it does. They do say then utilities may be placed under the roadside edge. So we're just saying that utilities will be placed under the roadside edge, right? That's what this is suggesting. All right. Well, I mean, so maybe it's okay.
Since it's applying to new subdivisions and not existing situations, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue. Making good progress.
So this first letter A is again just changing to 5 to 6 rather than the 4, 8 that was there.
Yep.
Letter D, we were just suggesting strengthening the language a little bit to hopefully get most of the trees planted in the tree belt. As it was worded, at least how I read it, it seemed like it left I don't know, more of an opportunity for the contractor to say, oh, well, you know, we really need to plant in the yard. And so we're suggesting just strengthening the language.
Taking out the when possible.
Right. It's minor.
And then you're adding an alternative suitable setback location may be determined only by the tree warden within 20 feet of the right of way. All right, so you're allowing for some possible relief there through a process like that, right?
Right.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Charles,
the only word they're actually trying to say is an alternative. The rest of that's already proposed by the COG.
Yep.
Right. Well, they're taking out the when possible.
And adding an alternative.
Right. Okay. So.
And then at the end of that same paragraph, we're suggesting adding in the tree belt, otherwise people could count mature deciduous shade trees anywhere, as I read this, anywhere on the property as counting toward tree belt trees. So we're saying any mature deciduous shade trees preserved in the tree belt. If it happens that there are some that end up there, then that can count toward that average.
Okay. Although there's an incentive to save mature trees if they do count in that number.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Charles, that's a very good point, because that's providing an incentive for developers to preserve existing mature trees.
But the way that it seems to me, the way this is worded, then if I had 2 oak trees in my backyard, then that would mean I wouldn't have to bother to plant trees on the tree belt.
If the developer decided to save those 2 trees when he was doing the clearing of all the land for the subdivision, then yes, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see a lot of.
I've seen a lot of subdivisions where they just clear the trees. They just literally mow the trees down, start from scratch. This is saying if you preserve some of these trees, we'll let you count them toward. I think that's a good thing. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Is there some other incentive we could use to encourage them to keep the mature trees on the lot that doesn't take away from getting new trees in the tree belt? Can you think of any other incentive that I agree, it's really important to keep the big trees that exist on the lot, but also we need the shade on the street. So how can we accommodate both of those things?
I mean, we could ask them to maintain, we could require them to maintain all mature trees that are outside of a dimensional building envelope. So in other words, you have a lot, then you have front yard, front side and rear setbacks. And you could say that, you know, all mature trees that are outside of those setback lines have to be preserved.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen cases where within the setback lines, trees, mature trees that could be preserved are sometimes not and cut down, and they could be even within the setback areas, as long as it's not in the building envelope.
Right, just take it out, just that. So I don't know, that sounds like a substantial change.
I'd have to look into this further to see how we could do an incentive. There's some feedback there.
Yeah, I'm going to mute everybody one more time here.
It's possible that within these regs, there is an incentive already built in. I'd have to look at the entire flow of the subdivision regs.
Charles, I think you're muted. Can I go ahead?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. So looking at the first 3 words of section D, it says street shade trees. So that's what that section is referring to.
Right.
So if it's in the back behind the house, it's not a street shade tree.
Right. I guess we were thinking about well, this was about the last sentence. It says any mature deciduous shade trees preserved, and then what Mary's suggesting adding is in the tree belt.
Yep.
So if we as opposed to just any mature shade trees on the property, then we sort of went down a rabbit hole with these other, the idea of keeping just, saying you have to maintain all mature trees that are outside the building envelope. Which is related but different, a different issue. It's another way of just trying to keep mature trees. Yes, Mary.
One possible alternative would be, since the 20-foot right-of-way is somewhere in here where it talks about the possibility of planting within that 20-foot setback as an alternative to planting on the tree belt. It's in the language earlier in this document. Perhaps this last sentence could say any mature deciduous shade trees preserved in the tree belt or within the 20-foot setback could be applied to this average. Because then at least you're getting the trees up near the street instead of just anywhere on the property.
Yeah, that sounds good. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay. Yeah, why don't we word it like that? I think that makes sense. Where are we now?
We're in section E.
Okay.
And this is simply a repetition of earlier suggestions. So suggesting changing to a 2-inch caliper, changing the 6 inches above ground to 4.5 feet above ground. And then again, specifying the large tree category of the tree list.
Okay.
And then the last little bit is talking about trees needing to survive for 1 year after planting and suggesting that the tree warden verifies that. Because otherwise I'm not sure what the mechanism would be for somebody to go back there and
Yeah.
verify that.
Yeah. So these are great. I think it definitely tightens things up here. I guess, Eric, does it I don't know how other folks feel, but does it make sense for you to think about incorporating these edits and then deciding whether or not we have to repost it and hold a new hearing based on this? Or
Yeah, so I would say based on what we did just now, going through it in great detail and pointing out those that can't be amended, I think we hit it right. And all these could be, and I'm good with every single change being proposed. The only issue I have when wanting to check with the DPW is the tree belt width itself, 5 to 6 feet. I don't think they have an issue with that. And we're talking about new subdivisions and not existing scenarios. So I'm good with everything tonight, basically, except for that one thing.
all right, but we're increasing the minimum from 4 to 5. So
4 to 5, but then the 8 feet to 6 feet. I don't know. I may think that's a good thing. I don't know.
yeah. All right. Well, let's see how it all goes, and then we can reevaluate. We'll have another opportunity to look at this again before our next meeting in January. George?
Yeah, and I would appreciate getting the document we're looking at right now, if Mary could share that with the board.
Eric, are you able to send that?
Yes, if you send it to me, Mary, I'll send it to the board tomorrow.
Yep, I sent it this morning, so.
Great. I haven't checked my email. Day off today.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready to close the public hearing? Do we need to do a motion and vote on that, Eric?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at 8:07.
I'm happy to second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Jim, you're muted.
Might need to
Jim's
unmute.
muted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jim?
Aye.
Okay. All right, thanks,
Yes,
Jim. All right, so we've closed the public hearing. I'm going to stop recording.